It's been an amazing 24 hours, even by the action-packed standards of 2018. There's been a lot of drama in Washington. Last night, as you doubtless know, former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani revealed on Sean Hannity's show that President Trump did, in fact, reimburse his lawyer, Michael Cohen, for payments Cohen made to porn star Stormy Daniels. That seemed like a major story at the time, but within hours, it wasn't even the biggest story of the day. NBC News reported that federal law enforcement had wiretapped Michael Cohen's phone and apparently recorded at least one conversation he'd had with the White House, presumably with the President of the United States. But then that story changed. NBC's new account claims that the FBI simply recorded the numbers that Cohen dialed and not the content of the calls he made. And that's where we are as of right now, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. One thing we know for sure is that NBC screwed up, and there's no surprise there, obviously. But that's pretty much all we can be certain of. If NBC's first story was wrong, why do we assume the second is right? We really don't know what the truth is, and we have no way of knowing. In the absence of honesty from our government, we're totally dependent upon leaks for our news, and many of those are dishonest. Michael Cohen, by the way, still doesn't know why his office was raided, and his phones and email were apparently monitored by the government because nobody in government will tell him, and they're not required to tell him. How Orwellian is that, by the way? Imagine if it happened to you. If one day armed men arrived at your office or your home and seized your phone, your computers, and your files at gunpoint, but never explained why they were doing it. And the next thing you knew, cable news anchors were calling you a criminal. Now, Michael Cohen certainly looks like a shady character, but so what? Shadiness is not a crime. The FBI can't destroy your life just because you talk like a character from The Sopranos or because you work for Donald Trump. Those are not felonies. Basic norms were violated here. Attorney-client privilege is an ancient and a vital concept. And by the way, so is privacy. The FBI bulldozed all of that. Let's hope they had a very good reason for doing it. The government better have evidence that Michael Cohen was doing something awful, putting lives at stake or betraying his country or something really beyond the pale in order to justify this. If it turns out that all of this was just about a financial settlement with some porn star, which, by the way, is a story that not a single American is honestly shocked by or threatened by, no matter what Anderson Cooper tells you, if that's all it's about, then what we're watching is a grotesque violation of civil liberties. And that would be a real crime, one with actual victims. Every American who believed in representative democracy, for example. James Kallstrom is a former assistant director of the FBI. He joins us tonight. Mr. Kallstrom, you spent your life at the FBI. You're a very, obviously, famous leader at the FBI. When you watch the last years, you've watched it unfold, how do you think the Bureau's doing?
Well, the leadership of the Bureau and the leadership of the department are doing well at all, Tucker. I mean, it's just outrageous. You know, I look back at some records, and during the SNLs in the 80s and 90s, you remember that. You know,
yes.
Literally thousands of SNLs that went belly up, and a lot of corruption, a lot of criminality. Not one law firm in the United States, not one law firm was ever served with a search warrant for that whole period of time. And yet this little 4-person or 5-person law firm that just happens to be the law firm of the President of the United States is attacked by pen registers, by surveillance, by search warrants. And, you know, to get a search warrant from a federal judge, in the criminal side, you have to talk about a criminal act that's taking place, a criminal predicate. And on the national security side, for the FISA judge, you have to talk about the threat to national security, and talk about
yes.
You know, why it's going to be affected negatively in both cases without these extraordinary measures. I think it's far-fetched. I'll be corrected if I'm wrong, but to see what kind of a predicate they could have possibly had in this case.
Well, so if it turns out that this really is all about a payment to a porn star, and I hate to say it, but let's be honest, it's just not a surprising story. Nobody voting in 2016 is going to be surprised by this. If it turns out that's really the predicate for this, what do you think of that?
And nor is it surprising that Bob Mueller would do something like this. It's Bob Mueller's people.
Why do you say that?
Well, I mean, look at the history. Look at how he went into Paul Manafort's house and had 4 o'clock in the morning. Here's a potential, if by worst cases, a white-collar crime stuff. And you go into a house at 4 or 5 in the morning with weapons shown. You drag a woman out of bed in her nightgown, and the children are, I assume, screaming, yelling around the house. I mean, that's just an outrage. We don't operate like that in the United States. If I was the head of the FBI, I would have not let the agents participate. Now, this is something that came from Mueller up to the U.S. Attorney in New York. And they apparently put together an affidavit, and I guess the FBI was involved with that, and that was presented to a federal judge. And when you go into a lawyer's office, you've got to be really careful. And the way it works today, you have really two teams of people. One team goes in and does the search. Another team kind of looks through the material to try to segment out anything that would be privilege. And in this case, the federal judge, who now has control over this case, has gone a step further and is turning all that material over to a senior federal judge, Barbara Jones, who's a fantastic judge, a good friend of mine over the years. And she'll decide, you know, what the U.S. government gets to see and what the U.S. government doesn't get to see.
Right. But you think, and I should just clear it up for audience who aren't familiar with your career, I wouldn't describe you as a soft-on-crime liberal at all. But you think, based on decades at the FBI, that what you're watching now is out of line. There's no precedent for it.
Tucker, I don't believe in kicking in doors unless there's a reason for it. And I don't believe for having outrageous search warrants, you know, unless there's a real bona fide reason. Is there a criminal predicate for this? I'd be surprised if there was. If it is, it's probably some concoction from some, you know, stupid intelligence contact. Or is it a national security predicate? I find that would be preposterous. You know, I just think these people are out of control. From the very time that Donald Trump was the nominee of the Republican Party, there has been a conspiracy, a fifth column, call it what you want, that has tried to stop him from getting elected, and number two, stop his effective work for the people of this country. And look at the magnificent job he's done in the economic front, in the foreign relations front, in a year and a half. In my view, more than the last three presidents combined.
I'm awestruck that you're saying this, because you're not a cable news talking head, and any of our viewers who are not familiar with your career ought to go to Google and look it up. You speak with authority on this subject, and so I'm shocked by what you said and saddened, but I believe you because you are believable on this subject. Mr. Kallstrom, thank you for joining us tonight.